I'm getting on my episode today. An inspiration to me for years, Avanti Nagral. She is a singer, songwriter, and she is on a mission to create change in society through challenging societal norms. She did her bachelor's at Harvard University and her master's from the Berklee College of Music, and now she spends her time in Mumbai and the United States. I'm so excited to have her as my guest today on this episode, and I'm really, really excited to learn from her. I'm Pratna, and you're listening to Rebel with a Purpose. Just a little side note, when I look at my back end, it is surprising to see how many people actually listen to these episodes, but how few actually subscribe or follow me. So please do that. I'm telling you, one subscription or one follow makes a huge difference to me and really, really motivates me to work tirelessly and produce better and better content every single day. So thank you so much for being here today, and I really hope you enjoy this episode.
Hi.
Hi, it's so nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
No worries. It's such an honor to have you. And I have seen so many of your videos on social media, and you've inspired me so much, which is why I really wanted to have you on my podcast. And I'm going to let you know a little bit about myself so you just know who you're talking to. And then I would
Yes.
do a small introduction just so our listeners know more about you. So, I'm Pratna. I've been born and brought up in Bangalore all my life, and I went to Singapore for my undergraduate studies in business and marketing. And now I'm a certified life coach by Mind Valley. It just took a whole turn after marketing. I just went into coaching and mental wellness because that's my passion. And so, yeah, that's what I'm doing right now. But I would love to learn more about you. Yeah.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing. My name is Avanti. I am a singer-songwriter, content creator. I split time between India and the US and never thought that I would be similar to you doing this professionally, but I'm really grateful every day that it's what I get to do.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And I wanted to ask you that I know you do make music and you write songs, especially about societal norms, and you make a lot of content on Instagram, LinkedIn on this. So, what do you think are some of the societal norms that are limiting our generation today?
I think it's honestly remnants of different generations, right? And that a lot of it is things that we don't openly talk about. It's as simple as understanding our own bodies and our minds.
Yeah.
Um, for generations, we haven't openly spoken about our bodies, right? Meaning we don't name our body parts. There are certain private body parts that we have where we don't openly say the words, say vagina or penis or anything related to our reproductive parts. And what that leads to is a sense of shame. What that leads to is a sense of misunderstanding. A lot of people don't know the functioning of their body parts. The same way in which we learn head, shoulders, knees, and toes, we should learn all aspects of our body because it gives us a sense of bodily autonomy and control over our own bodies. And that by extension extends to understanding consent, understanding, our social relations, understanding basics of sex ed, basics of mental health, basics of whether that's, period education should be for everybody, regardless of background or whether they own a uterus. I think it starts at the basics, right? When we think about education, a lot of times we limit ourselves to school and college and general learning, but so much of it is social education, whether that's understanding our bodies and our minds, or whether that's understanding what do you do when there's a fire? What do you do? What is basic first aid? What is basic personal finance? And I think when it comes to norms, what ends up happening is because there's so much shame around so many aspects, or there's just hush hush and taboo that we tend to lean into stereotypes, right? We globally have still a very strong internalized sense of patriarchy. And a lot of our stereotypes, a lot of policy, a lot of different things are informed by those remnants. And I think the more openly we talk about things, the more we call out things. It's a small start, but that small start allows for us to at least be aware of things that are happening around us, situations we might be in, and just general stereotypes we should avoid.
Yeah, 100%. And I've seen your videos with your grandma about, just talking about sex, and they're so cute. And it's really changing the way people are thinking. So, yeah, thank you so much for putting those out. And another thing would be, do you think our generation, which is the Generation Z, do you think we're the ones to break the cycle? Do you think we're the ones to change these norms?
I mean, it takes a village, right? It takes everybody. I think that there are people in generations past, obviously, who have done so much work to be able to get us to a place where we have the ability to do that. I think our generation has the particular advantage of being interconnected globally and the exposure we get through the internet, right? As much as we have seen the negative effects of social media, there's also so many positive effects, right? It allows us to connect to each other. There's so much opportunity for learning. There's so much opportunity for exposure, where normally that exposure would come from the city that you're in, or the school that you're in, or the environment that you're around. But today you can be pretty much anywhere in the world, anywhere in the country, which you normally wouldn't have access through your peers, and you have access through the internet. So I think that allows us to be a generation where we can move that needle. However, I do think that it's not enough for our generation to be the only one who is pushing that forward, because it is important to make sure that we bridge those generational gaps, right? Because at the end of the day, it's going to be a while till our generation is in the spaces of change making, whether that's policy change making, whether that's, effective leadership, whatever it is. So I think it's important to help try to bridge that gap at home, in our environments, even though it might feel hard and you might say have relatives or your own family that might have very different viewpoints, at the very least sharing yours and starting that discourse, even if you don't get to the same page, it at least allows for openness to perspective and more tolerance, because otherwise you're just creating the divide further.
Yeah, 100%. And what do you think, what does authenticity mean to you? Like staying true to yourself, what does that mean to you in your life?
In my life specifically, a lot of the work that we do, I'm really grateful, but sometimes it can get really confusing when you have a public presence, because you are constantly grappling between the identities of the person you are and the persona that people see.
Yeah.
I try my best to keep both very similar, but obviously what people see is still always going to be a 2D representation, right? It's not going to be representative of my emotions in that moment in time, or, so many other aspects. And therefore, I think when it comes to authenticity, just trying your best to stay true to who you are in that moment, because you're going to change and evolve, every single day. And so it's not like you are like this, you must fit this mold, but rather, what am I feeling in the moment? How can I make sure that I'm expressing that in the moment? And does it feel true to who I am, whether somebody was watching or not, whether I'm alone or not, or whether I'm in a larger context?
Mm. Yeah, and I've seen your videos and I really can feel that you're being very true to yourself. And with regards to dealing with tough emotions in life and negative or low emotions, what would your advice be to how we can cope better with negative emotions?
I think it's hard because we do have this positive and negatively valenced emotions, but emotions are emotions, right? They all come from different aspects, and you see that in the form of release. What I mean is, for example, I cry. Like for me, that is my form of catharsis and release. And I will cry when I'm feeling stressed and potentially negative emotion, but I will also cry when I'm feeling happy and potentially positive emotions, because it's just that form of release. And I think that's super important to recognize that sometimes our physiological reactions are similar, because it's less about whether an emotion is positive or negative, but how charged or valenced is it? How intense is it? And how can we deal with it? I'm so glad that there's so much discourse around mental health now, because at the end of the day, our mental and emotional health, the way we deal with it, has so much to do with how resilient we are in the face of it, right? I think extremes of either nature are not healthy. It's amazing to feel positive emotion, but not to the extreme that takes over your life. And similarly, negative emotion, we shouldn't either. Psychologically, we're so much more geared to be more sensitive toward our negative emotions. And if we treat it with the same kind of balance that we do our positive emotions, we will be in more of a zone of stasis. But I think a lot of it comes down to, do we have coping mechanisms? So do we have outlets? For me, music has always been a huge outlet. So many other aspects of that. Counseling, therapy, being able to find moments of just finding, yourself, whether that's for a lot of people, that might be meditation or mindfulness. For some people, they may not enjoy those practices. Whatever it is that just centers you. For some people, it means going on a run. For some people, it means just staring at some object. But something that is a centering practice is super, super important to ground yourself in understanding that your emotions will come and go, but you have to figure out how to be resilient in the face of them. And, I think only if you experience negative emotions can you truly appreciate the positive ones. So wouldn't look at them as a bad thing, but I would look at them as something that just needs to be managed.
Yeah, 100%. And do you think, I've noticed this in my friend circle and in our generation, that a lot of people just feel very overwhelmed and very confused. And I've seen a lot of times that they're either in jobs that they just don't like, they just hate, and so they don't feel satisfied, or they lack a sense of meaning and fulfillment in life, is what I've seen in my circle. And I want to ask you, like, what would your advice be, or rather, what is your journey of finding your purpose to where you are right now? Yeah.
I think that's a really hard question, and I completely agree with you. I think, I've interacted with people across so many different age groups, and even the oldest folks who, let's say, have generated a lot of wealth in life, have had great jobs. If they don't find a sense of purpose, you see that, right? And I think purpose is one of those things no amount of money can buy, no amount of experience can have. It's it's internally and externally motivated. I think for me, a lot of my purpose actually comes from a sense of privilege. And here's what I mean by that. I'm extremely aware that I grew up with a lot of relative privilege, right? Socioeconomically, health, education. I had a lot of physical health difficulties, and I was able to access care because my family had money to be able to pay for care, and I had access to doctors. And there were certain conditions I had that did I not have access, I would have not been here today. And so that's not something I take lightly, right? Similarly with education, I went to cool universities, but I didn't necessarily go there because I was smarter than anybody else or more talented. I just had the exposure and the access and the resources, right? Not discounting the work it takes, but at the same time, there's so many people who work hard, right? And I recognize that a lot of that comes from privilege, and it comes from the opportunities you've been afforded in life. And so for me, a lot of my sense of purpose comes from this sense of recognizing that, and recognizing that there's huge inequities in all of these spaces. And so how do you do your part in bridging that inequity? Whether that's as simple as creating awareness, or from a longer term perspective, helping build resources, helping build opportunities, so that other people are able to at least dream of or access similar things. And I think because of that really strong sense of internal purpose, no matter what happens, that guides it, right? So there is aspects of the nature of the job that I'm in that feel very transient, right? A lot of it's dictated by numbers, a lot of it's dictated by what happens in the everyday. As you were saying, negative emotions, hate comments, this, that, whatever it is, it bothers me less, because to me, I see the value of the potential impact, and I see the value of that connection with purpose. And I think as much as it's important to find purpose, it's also important to find your passion. And your passion doesn't have to be your profession. For a lot of people, it isn't. And for a lot of people, it becomes this form of escapism. For me, it is an aspect of my profession. I love using my voice, whether that's, being an artist or musician, or being able to speak, or whatever it is. Sometimes when you turn your passion into profession, it loses its charm. There were points at which I didn't love music for music's sake, because I was doing it as a job. And when you do something as a job, it sometimes takes away the allure, But I think it was just recentering myself in saying, hey, this is the purpose and this is the medium. And that medium also happens to be associated with passion. And they're not easy things to find, but I think reflecting on your life thus far, no matter how old or how young you are, and saying, what is an example of something I did where I felt truly connected, or I felt like I was giving back in some way. Just, we all have some sort of a moment. What was it that I enjoyed about that? And is that something I can do more of? Or do I need to explore down that path and see what specifically drives me, you know?
Yeah, I love that. And I love the link between passion and purpose, and also the fact that you brought privilege into this topic. So thank you for that. And what advice would you give to your younger self?
To chill out. I think I was very stressed as, as a teenager and in my early 20s. Yeah, genuinely, I think if I'd everything that happened or didn't happen would have still happened. I just needed to approach it with a little bit more calmness. And over the last couple of years, I've been surrounded by more people who are calm. And I think that has brought some sort of level of zenness into my life. So tell my younger self to just chill.
Yeah, and I definitely think that surrounding yourself with the right people and the right environment also help a lot. So, okay, now that I asked you about your younger self, I'm going to ask you about your future self. Where do you see yourself in the coming years?
From a personal and professional space, honestly, so long as I'm just continuing to use my voice, whatever that manifests into, I'm grateful, right? And that's kind of where it is. I don't like to be like, I want to do this, I want to do that. I mean, I have ambitions of I have ambitions to build a nonprofit, to build startups, to build a bunch of other things as ways to help further the purpose and the mission. As much as I have ambitions to be on certain types of stages and certain types of, but I think it's less useful to say these are specific things I want, because a few years ago, I would have never dreamt that I would be a YouTuber or in this space. So I've learned that the more fluid you are to what specifically happens, but keep grounded as to the purpose of what you want to happen. That's really what it is. So I hope that in 5 years, 10 years, I'm still using my voice in many different ways. I hope that I'm still surrounding myself with people, like you said, who are nurturing and supporting and whom I support. And yeah, continue to build a connection with whatever communities we have.
Yeah. And how do you think we can strike that balance between, being present in the moment or being calm, as you said, in the moment, but also wanting more in the future, like striving for more?
I don't think being present limits you from being in the future. One thing I till fairly recently, I used to always live in the past and the future. I was stressed about what happened in the past and very stressed about my future, but the only time you have is the present. And there are things one can do to plan for the future. I think a lot of us don't think about our future selves. We're like, what needs to be done now? What needs to be done tomorrow? But to be able to support your goals for a year from now, what are certain things you can work on? And as somebody who has been a musician and artist in the performing arts for a majority of her life, we have this deep sense of craft, right? You might have heard of this quote or just general framework that you need to work 10,000 hours on something to get to a certain level of proficiency. And so, as a singer, for example, your craft involves practicing or doing riyaz every day or doing certain exercises. But no matter what space you're in, every space requires craft and requires working on that. And that requires discipline. Even as a life coach, right? For you, there's certain aspects of craft that you have to probably work on, whether that even means learning from mentors or peers, or making sure you're constantly upskilling yourself, or making sure you're reading up on certain things. And someone comes to you with an issue that you don't know how to deal with, making sure you're prepared to deal with those types of future situations. That's all craft work. And I think that craft work is really, really important for our future selves, because it allows us to invest in our future selves in so many different ways. So we often will focus so much on what has to be done in the moment, no matter what kinds of jobs we're in. The kinds of work that I'm in also involves a lot of admin, like any other job does. And if I just focus on that, I'm not preparing for my future self. And what my future self needs is also carving out time, even if it's once a week, to take stock of, hey, what are my goals? What are things I care about? Where do I want to be? And what do I need to do right now? Either from a craft work space, or do I need support in other ways? For example, if you're running a startup, like, do you need to hire? There's just so many small things that you need to do to get yourself to where you want your future self to be. And I think that comes from a sense of recognizing that there are things that are important, but they may not be urgent in the moment, and you still have to focus on those.
Okay. So, for me recently also, I've started to realize the importance of like just setting goals or gaining clarity on like what do I want to do next? Because if I'm not clear, it's just never gonna happen. So it's like I don't even like set a time out. It's just like I wake up and I feel like overwhelmed and I feel confused and I'm like, okay, what do I need right now? And instantly when I check in with myself, like, what do I really need right now? It's like I need to write it down. Like I need to talk to a friend about it. I need to like put this out there because I'm confused about how to go ahead with, certain goals that I have for the next month or for the next year even. So I take like once a week actually. Now I've noticed that this is what helps me feel better about gaining clarity in life. And I just write about, my goals for the next 1 month, then the next 2 months, then the next 6 months, and then the next 1 year. Like, what do I want to do? And of course, it gets more and more specific when I go closer to the deadline. When I'm done with 2 months, when I go for the next 6 months, it gets more and more specific. But yeah, that has helped me immensely. So, which is why I was asking you about like planning. How do you plan for your future, or like plan for um setting your goals in a certain way? And as you did mention that it is something that you try not to do too much of to get too overwhelmed, because you were always a person who used to think too much about your future, too much about your past, but you also mentioned that planning is important to you.
Yeah. Um, I think planning is a way to have a sense of control over your thoughts, right? It
Yeah.
doesn't necessarily mean you have a sense of control over your future, because you might have all the plans and something else might come in.
Yeah.
But somebody who thinks a lot and often overthinks, I think for me, like you said, writing stuff down is really, really useful and really important. Sometimes if I'm unable to sleep, it's usually because there's something on my mind. I will write down whatever's on my mind, and then I will make sense of it. I love planning, and even in the daily, in the present, right? The kind of work I'm in is very unstructured. So it can get very overwhelming for somebody who's used to a lot of structure. So I make sure that I still structure out, like I live by my calendar. But it helps me feel like I'm having small goals every day that I'm achieving, right?
Mm.
Especially if you're somebody who is goal oriented,
Yeah.
and that is your disposition. It is important to feel like, okay, in this hour, I've set out that I'm going to do XYZ thing. Once you finish it, you feel a sense of achievement, right? Um, and I think from a future perspective, like you're saying, right? How do you plan out your goals and things? I think regular check-ins with myself, regular check-ins with my team, kind of, are we all on the same page? Writing stuff down, mind mapping, making sure that you're checking into that where you are, but also trying not to be as rigid, where if this did not happen in this month, I won't feel bad about it, right? Because I think it's the planning process can be wonderful, and that can feel like, okay, I feel like I have structure, but the actual goal can be a little bit loose because you don't know necessarily. Maybe 3 months from now, you are at a place where what you dreamed of is so much closer than you thought, right? Or so much further away. And so I think um, it's useful to have goals, but at the same time, don't let those limit you.
Mm. Yeah. And with regards to goals, when have you felt not good enough in your life? And what have you done when you feel that way?
A lot of the time, and I recognized every time I feel not good enough, it comes from a sense of either comparison with others or with myself, or, baseline jealousy. Um, and I really try to reframe that. If let's say I've been looking at a lot of other people's work in similar spaces or whatever it might be, and I start to feel jealous, I'm like, okay, 1 second. Why am I feeling jealous? What is the specific thing that I'm feeling jealous about? Is it something that's in my control? If yes, what can I do about it? Meaning, if the specific thing I feel jealous about is something that I can also access, can I do something about it? Great. If not, can't do anything. You can only work on what's in your control. But there's also sometimes jealousy you can turn into inspiration. You might feel jealous and you're like, wait, actually, if I just reframe this, I'm inspired by this thing, and maybe it's going to inspire me to work harder in this way where I feel like I don't, or explore this avenue that I currently don't. I think that this whole feeling not good enough, imposter syndrome, whatever it is for a lot of people, is supernatural, right? But if we're so hard on ourselves constantly by not feeling good enough, we'll never be coming from a place of peace, right? And therefore, we won't even be able to do what matters. I used to feel it all the time. I still do. I have several moments in which I feel like I'm not good enough, but I talk it out. Because when I talk it out, I realize sometimes how ridiculous I'm being. Um, and recognizing, I think that's why your past is important, just to recognize how far you've come. Because you may not feel like you are at where you wanted to be, but recognize where you were and where you've come. Whether that's professionally or even in your personal development, emotional development, whatever it is. I think that sense of feeling like there is growth and constant progress, no matter how small, helps in realizing, okay, hey, I am doing my best. I'm working toward what I can. And a lot of that comes from our sense of self-worth, right? And it's hard because we don't always feel worthy of something. But that's just something that takes a lot of internal work. And trust me, I've been in a place where I was constantly feeling like I wasn't good enough. But I realized that that's not helping anybody. It's not helping me, obviously, but neither is it helping anybody I'm working with, because if they're constantly surrounded by somebody who's like, I'm not good enough, I'm not good enough, I exude that energy, you know?
Yeah, 100%. And
Or like, I am enough and the good, great, best will come. But I am enough. And then how do I move?
yeah, I love that. And yeah, thank you so much for being so vulnerable here today with me. And I want to be a little vulnerable with you and let you know that there's something that I'm dealing with right now, which is, it's not like I just started my business a few months ago. And, the whole concept of success, or, being there just seems very far away for me. Like I genuinely like wake up and I'm like, when am I, going to get my first client, or when is things going to start moving? Because I have put in so much hard work and sometimes it feels like, is it even worth it? So have you been at that point in your life ever, and what would your advice be? Yeah.
Well, firstly, I want to remind you that you just started a couple months ago. And while it feels like a long time, that's huge. The fact that you even started is the first step, and huge congratulations, and very proud of you. It's hard, right? Because it sometimes feels like a huge waiting game. When will it be my turn? When will this manifest into what I dreamed of? But these things are out of our control. The only thing that's in your control is the intention you put in and the work you put in. So if there's, let's say, an aspect of whatever success means to you in the moment that you do have control over, such as maybe I can use research XYZ avenues to potentially get more clients, right? Or work in shadow with somebody as a form of learning that skill to get more clients. Let's say your goal at the moment is getting clients, right? There's many, many different ways to go about it. And you've probably been trying one or two ways really, really hard. Just take stock and be like, okay, there must be other ways, because there were people before me who maybe didn't have social media, didn't have XYZ things, and still were able to access clients, right? So how can I understand what those ways are? How can I, whether it needs to be, it's hard, but it is just really taking stock of what happens in the moment. I felt that so many times. For example, being an artist, success means a certain thing, right? It might mean selling out XYZ concert tickets or selling out whatever. And it used to bother me for a long time because I do multiple things, that there would be people in different industries who wouldn't necessarily validate me in certain ways, right? I wouldn't be considered for certain awards, or I wouldn't get the certain milestones I wanted, or I felt very far behind in certain spaces. And I was like, 1 second, I might feel far behind in this specific space, but look at how far I've come in other spaces. And that's a huge thing, right? You might know somebody who has clients, but they may not have set up the infrastructure that you have. They may not have a podcast. They may not have, and these are all steps that you're taking toward your future self, whether you see it or not. And sometimes that's why I'm saying goals are really dangerous. They're important, but they're dangerous because sometimes we get fixated on this is the specific goal. But no, if you feel like you're not succeeding in the moment, reframe your idea of success, right? Because success is so many different things. And I'm not saying that as a cop out. I'm saying that as there are moments of success every day, as there are moments of failure. And it's important to embrace failure. But it's also important to recognize, okay, this was a success. If it may not be my definition of success from a month ago, but I can have a new definition today,
And thank you so much for that. That was beautifully said. And yeah, thank you for your time. These are all the questions I have for you. And it was so nice to have you on my episode. I have really a lot of respect for you and for your work. So
Thank you. That means a lot. And thank you for such a wonderful conversation. It didn't feel like a question answer session whatsoever. It just felt like talking to somebody who clearly has a sense of passion and purpose, and sounds like you want to do a lot in this world. And I am so confident that you will. And you'll figure out the way in which that happens.
Thank you. That means a lot coming from you. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye.
You too.
So much.
Bye.
Bye.
Well, that's the end of my episode, guys, and I really hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. You're listening to Rebel with a Purpose, and I'm Pratna, signing off.